That night, they told me to kneel on the marble floor of the living room, the same floor I'd scrubbed every stain from for 30 years while raising my son alone. I nodded. But in my coat pocket was a phone number and a stack of documents that could expose their entire empire built on forged loans and fraudulent contracts. What they didn't understand when a mother stays silent for too long. Her first call becomes the kill shot. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and at 67 years old, I thought I'd seen enough of life's cruelties to know when someone was setting a trap. But sitting at my son's dining table that October evening, watching Savannah's manicured fingers drum against her wine glass, I realized I'd walked straight into one. The house smelled of rosemary and expensive candles, the kind that cost more than my weekly groceries. Daniel had texted me at 4:30 that afternoon. Family dinner tonight, 7 sharp. Don't be late. No warmth. No, love you. Mom. Just orders. Like I was an employee being summoned to headquarters. Savannah had outdone herself with the presentation. Bone china I'd never seen before, crystal glasses that caught the light from the gas fireplace, and a centerpiece of white orchids that probably cost more than my monthly bus pass. She wore a cream cashmere sweater that whispered money with every movement. Her diamond necklace she'd mentioned it cost $8,400 at least 6 times since I'd met her catching the light whenever she leaned forward. The lamb is from that new boutique butcher on Meridian, she announced, setting the plate before me with the precision of a surgeon. They source from a farm in Vermont. Grass-fed, obviously. I reached for the salt shaker, a simple, instinctive movement. My fingers had barely grazed the crystal when Savannah's voice cut through the air like a blade. Excuse me. I looked up. Her green eyes had gone cold. Reptilian, almost. Did you just reach for salt before even tasting my food? I always salt my lamb, I said quietly. It's just habit. Habit. She set down her fork with deliberate slowness. Do you have any idea how insulting that is? I spent 4 hours preparing this meal. 4 hours. And you can't even do me the courtesy of tasting it first. Daniel shifted in his chair. I waited for him to say something. Anything. To diffuse the situation. Instead, he cleared his throat. Mum, Savannah has a point. It's really disrespectful. The word hung in the air between us. Disrespectful. From the boy whose diapers I'd changed while working double shifts. From the man whose college tuition I'd paid by scrubbing office buildings until my knees bled. I apologize, I said, setting the salt shaker down. The lamb is delicious. But Savannah wasn't finished. She never was. An apology isn't enough anymore. Eleanor? She exchanged a look with Daniel, practiced, rehearsed. We need to talk about your pattern of behavior. My pattern. The constant criticism. The passive-aggressive comments. The way you undermine me at every opportunity. I stared at her, genuinely bewildered. When have I? Last month, at the Steinberg dinner party? You told everyone I'd bought the wine at Costco. Because you asked me where I thought it was from, and I guessed. You embarrassed me in front of the partnership committee wives. Her voice rose slightly, just enough to sound wounded. Do you know what that could have cost Daniel's career? Daniel leaned forward. Mum, we've been patient. We've tried to include you, to make you feel welcome. But if you can't show Savannah basic respect. We're hosting the Highland Motors executive team next Friday. Savannah interrupted, her tone shifting to business-like efficiency. It's crucial for Daniel's promotion. We need to know you can behave appropriately. The words stung more than any slap could have. Behave appropriately, like I was a child, like I was something to be managed. What are you asking me to do? Savannah smiled, then not with warmth, but with the satisfaction of a chess player moving their queen into position. A public apology, in front of our guests. You'll acknowledge your behavior and commit to changing. Otherwise, she paused, letting the silence stretch. Otherwise, I don't think we can continue having you in our home, or our lives. Daniel nodded. It's more than fair. Mum, just say you're sorry, mean it, and we can move forward? I looked at my son, really looked at him. The boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms had been replaced by a stranger in a $2,000 suit, his expression as cold as his wife's diamonds. You want me to apologize? In front of strangers? For insulting her cooking by reaching for salt? For everything, Savannah corrected. For the pattern of disrespect. For trying to sabotage our marriage. For being a toxic presence in our lives. Toxic. The word echoed in the dining room with its vaulted ceilings and smart speakers that probably cost more than I'd made in a month at the municipal building. I folded my napkin carefully. Precisely. The way my mother had taught me decades ago. I understand. So you'll do it? Daniel asked. And for just a moment, I heard something in his voice, uncertainty, maybe even hope. I'll be at your dinner party, I said, standing slowly. My cloth gloves, the ones I wore on the night bus to keep my hands warm, sat on the entry table like a reminder of who I really was. And I'll say exactly what needs to be said. Savannah's smile widened. She thought she'd won. The night bus from Stonebridge Ridge back to my apartment took 47 minutes. I sat in the back, watching the city transform from manicured lawns to strip malls to the modest neighborhoods where people like me lived. My reflection in the window looked older than I remembered. When had those lines around my eyes gotten so deep? I closed my eyes and let myself remember. Daniel was 6 when his father died. Heart attack at his desk, the insurance company said. No life insurance, we couldn't afford it. Just me. A high school diploma, and a boy who needed shoes, food, doctors, and someday, college. The Westbrook Municipal Services Department hired me for the night shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Sunday through Thursday. I cleaned the bus terminals, mopped the records room, scrubbed toilets in the administrative building. My hands turned raw from the industrial cleaners. My back ached constantly. But the pay was steady, and they didn't ask questions when I brought Daniel with me during school breaks, letting him sleep on the break room couch while I worked. Every penny that didn't go to rent or food went into Daniel's college fund. I wore the same 3 uniforms for 8 years, patching holes, ignoring the stares. When other kids had Game Boys and designer sneakers, Daniel had library books and generic cereal. But he was brilliant. God, he was brilliant. Straight A's, full scholarship to Ohio State for engineering, graduated summa cum laude. The day he got his job offer from Brennan Structural Systems, he took me to dinner at an actual restaurant, not a diner, but a place with cloth napkins and a wine list. No more night shifts, Mom, he'd said, gripping my hand across the table. I'm going to take care of you now. You'll live with me. We'll be a real family again. I'd cried into my pasta that night. Happy tears, I thought. Then Savannah appeared. They met at some young professionals mixer at the High Hollow Country Club. She was everything I wasn't: polished, educated, from a family with a summer house and a boat on Lake Erie. When Daniel brought her to meet me, She'd looked around my one-bedroom apartment with barely concealed disgust, though her smile never wavered. "How charming," she'd said about my mother's china. The only nice thing I owned. So, vintage. The wedding was at High Hollow, naturally. Savannah's family filled the country club with investment bankers, lawyers, doctors. My side had my church friend Rose, 2 cousins from Indiana, and a handful of my former co-workers from municipal services. They sat us at table 12, in the back corner by the kitchen doors. I watched my son at the head table, laughing at his father-in-law's jokes, and felt him slipping away like water through my fingers. After they returned from their honeymoon in Santorini, the changes started small. Sunday dinners became Sunday brunches with Savannah's parents, then monthly dinners. Then, "We'll call you when we're free." The guest room I was supposed to move into became Savannah's home office, then a gym, then a meditation space that needed to maintain its energy. I found the first photograph in a box in their garage, Daniel and me at his college graduation, both of us crying and laughing, my night shift uniform barely hidden under a borrowed blazer. The next time I visited, the box was gone, their walls filled with professional portraits from their travels, their wedding, Savannah's family gatherings at the lake. Every trace of our life before her had been erased, archived, deleted. "Your mother seems sweet," I once heard Savannah tell someone at a dinner party, not knowing I was in the hallway. "But there's such a class difference. It's hard for her to fit in with our circle. We try to include her when appropriate, but you understand." I understood perfectly. The systematic exclusion was masterful. RSVPs to events that somehow got lost. Dinner reservations that were accidentally made for 4 instead of 5. Group texts about family plans that I was mysteriously never added to. And always, always, Savannah's sweet smile and hollow apologies. "Oh, Eleanor, I'm so sorry. I thought Daniel told you the venue changed." Daniel saw none of it, or chose not to see it. His promotion to senior engineer, then project manager, then associate director consumed him. He worked 70-hour weeks, traveled constantly, lived for Savannah's approval like a plant reaching for sun. When I tried, gently, to mention feeling excluded, he'd sigh with exhaustion. "Mum, Savannah's trying so hard to include you. Maybe you're being oversensitive. This isn't easy for her either." The last photograph of us together, really together, was from 3 years ago. His birthday dinner at a steakhouse downtown. I'd saved for 2 months to afford it. Savannah had been sick that night, and for 4 hours, I had my son back. We laughed about old times, shared a chocolate cake, and he'd hugged me goodbye with genuine warmth. The next day, Savannah posted on Instagram about how some people didn't understand boundaries, how toxic family members could destroy marriages, how she was grateful for a husband who put his wife first. 67 likes, including one from Daniel. Now, sitting on that bus, watching the city lights blur past, I pulled out my phone and looked at that old photo one more time. The boy who'd once promised to take care of me was gone, replaced by someone who wanted me to kneel and beg forgiveness for the crime of existing in his wife's world. But mothers don't forget, and they don't forgive betrayal easily. Tomorrow, I would make some calls of my own. 3 days after the ultimatum dinner, I sat in a corner booth at Murphy's Coffee on 3rd Street, nursing a black coffee and watching the door. I'd chosen this place carefully, far enough from Stonebridge Ridge that Savannah would never set foot here, busy enough that 2 people talking wouldn't draw attention. She walked in at 2:15, scanning the room with practiced vigilance. Savannah Pierce, in a designer coat and oversized sunglasses despite the grey October afternoon. But not alone, a young man followed her, maybe 30, wearing a cheap suit that tried too hard to look expensive. They took a booth in the back. I pulled out my phone, pretending to scroll while watching them in the reflection of the window. Savannah slid an envelope across the table. The man opened it, counted bills, then handed her a folder thick with documents. She flipped through them quickly, nodded, and they both stood to leave. The entire exchange took less than 10 minutes. I waited until they'd driven away in separate cars before approaching the barista. "That woman who just left," I said, sliding a 20 across the counter. "She comes here often." The kid shrugged. "Every Tuesday and Thursday, same time. Always meets different people. Tips like crap." That evening, I called Rose Ellison. We'd sat together at First Presbyterian for 15 years, shared casserole recipes and grandchildren photos, though mine were just pictures Daniel sent, increasingly rarely. Rose's nephew worked as a private investigator, small-time stuff, mostly cheating spouses, insurance fraud, background checks. "Avery's good people," Rose assured me over the phone. "Discreet. And he gives family discounts." Avery Cole looked younger than his 38 years, with the kind of forgettable face that probably served him well in his profession. We met at my apartment. I made coffee. He pulled out a tablet and stylus. "Your son's wife," he said after I'd explained what I needed. "You think she's hiding something. I know she is. I just don't know what." He named a price painful but manageable if I skipped a few meals. I wrote the check without hesitation. "Give me a week," he said. "Maybe less." It took him 4 days. The email came at 11:43 p. Marked urgent. "Call me immediately. Don't use your home phone." I walked to the gas station on Brookside and used the payphone. They still had one. Miraculously. "Mrs. Whitmore?" Avery's voice was tight. "Your daughter-in-law isn't who she says she is. Pierce isn't even her maiden name. It's Garrett. She changed it legally 6 years ago after a bankruptcy filing in Michigan." Bankruptcy. That's the tip of the iceberg. She's got an LLC, Pierce Legacy Holdings, registered in Delaware, but operating here. Your son's name is on some of the documents as an investor. But here's the thing. The operating agreement puts all control in her hands. He's basically a silent partner in his own investment. My hand tightened on the receiver. "What kind of business?" "Real estate flipping, supposedly, but the numbers don't add up. She's moving money in circles, using new investor funds to pay off old debts. Classic Ponzi structure, just sophisticated enough to avoid obvious detection." And Daniel. Based on the signatures and transfer patterns, he probably thinks it's legitimate. His salary goes into a joint account. She transfers chunks to the LLC, tells him it's for investments. But the money's really servicing debt credit cards, personal loans, a HELOC on your son's house he might not even know about. I leaned against the phone booth's scratched glass. How much debt? Between her personal accounts and the family obligations, north of $520,000. And here's the kicker, she's in the process of securing a mortgage for a new property. $820,000 house in High Hollow Estates. They can't afford that. They can't. But the mortgage application shows a gift letter for the down payment, supposedly from her family. Except her family filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago. The gift letter's fraudulent, and your son's signature is on it as co-borrower. The pieces clicked together in my mind like tumblers in a lock. She's going to destroy him. If this goes through and implodes, which it will, he's on the hook for fraud. Career over, possible jail time, definite financial ruin. Send me everything, I said. Every document, every screenshot, every piece of evidence. Mrs. Whitmore, with this information, you should go to... I know exactly where I'm going with it. But first, I need more. Can you get me communication between her and her mother? That's legally grey. I'm not asking for anything illegal. Just social media, public posts, anything that shows their relationship. He sighed. I'll see what I can find. But Mrs. Whitmore, whatever you're planning, be careful. People like this, when they're cornered. Mr. Cole, I said, watching my breath fog in the cold night air. I spent 30 years on my knees scrubbing floors so my son could have a better life. I'm not afraid of getting my hands dirty again. The next package arrived 2 days later. Screenshots of Instagram messages between Savannah and someone listed as Mom Victoria Garrett, living in Scottsdale. The old bitch actually bought your sob story. Danny Boy signed everything without reading. 3 more months, and we're clear. What about when it crashes? By then the assets will be protected. Let him deal with the cleanup. Men are so easy when you cry pretty enough. Just make sure he doesn't talk to her. Last thing we need is mother-son bonding time. Already handled. She's grovelling for forgiveness at dinner next week. After that humiliation, Danny won't want her near us. I sat on my threadbare couch, reading the messages again and again. My son, my brilliant, trusting son, was a mark in his own marriage, and I was the only one who could save him. I opened my notebook and began making lists, phone numbers to call, documents to organize, witnesses to gather. Savannah Pierce wanted a performance at her dinner party. She was going to get one. The folder Avery delivered on Wednesday morning was thicker than a phone book. I spread its contents across my kitchen table like evidence in a murder case which, in a way, it was the murder of my son's future, documented in black and white. First, the credit reports. Savannah had opened 14 credit cards in the past 3 years, 11 of them maxed out. Total balance $187,000. The statements showed purchases from Neiman Marcus, Saks, jewelry stores, luxury car rentals, living a millionaire's lifestyle on a house of cards. But that was just personal debt. The Pierce Legacy Holdings documentation painted a darker picture. She's running a classic shell game, Avery explained, pointing to a flowchart he'd created. Money comes in from Investor A, gets logged as property acquisition funds. But instead of buying property, it goes to pay Investor B their returns. Meanwhile, she's taking 40% as management fees. How many investors? 12 that I've found. Total investment, $2.3 million. And actual properties owned, 2. Worth maybe $400,000 combined. Both heavily mortgaged. I studied the bank statements. Daniel's name appeared everywhere. Co-signer, co-investor, co-applicant. His steady salary from Brennan Structural Systems was the backbone of Savannah's creditworthiness. Without him, her house of cards collapsed. This HELOC, I pointed to a Bank of America document. $200,000 against Daniel's house. Taken out 6 months ago, based on the signature comparison. Your son signed it, but the notary who witnessed it. She's Savannah's yoga instructor. The funds went straight to Pierce Legacy Holdings, then disappeared into what looks like debt payments to previous investors threatening legal action. I picked up the mortgage application for the new house, $820,000 for a McMansion in High Hollow Estates, the kind of place where CEOs and surgeons lived. The down payment section made my blood run cold. Gift letter from parents, $164,000. The letter was signed by Victoria and Richard Pierce, except Richard Pierce didn't exist. Savannah's father was named Gary Garrett, and he died in 2018. "This is wire fraud," I said quietly. "Multiple counts," Avery confirmed. "The bank requires verification of gift funds. She's submitted falsified bank statements showing the money in an account that doesn't exist. When the bank tries to verify and can't, the mortgage will fall through. But by then, your son will already be implicated." "When is closing supposed to happen?" "November 15th, 10 days after the dinner party." I found the purchase agreement. Daniel's signature was on every page, bold and trusting. The boy who'd once brought me his report cards to sign, so proud of his A's, had signed his life away without reading the fine print. "There's more?" Avery said, pulling out his tablet. "I did some digging on the LLC's operating agreement, hidden in subsection 12B, paragraph 4, upon dissolution of the company or divorce proceedings. Sole ownership of all assets transfers to the managing partner." "Savannah." "Exactly. Your son's invested almost $300,000 of his savings based on these transfers. If she pulls the plug or files for divorce, he gets nothing. Worse, he's still liable for all debts incurred." I walked to the window, watching the morning traffic build on the street below. Working people heading to honest jobs, paying honest bills. She's going to bankrupt him and walk away. The timeline suggests she's accelerating. This new mortgage. It's probably her last big score. Once it's exposed as fraudulent, she'll claim ignorance, file for divorce citing financial abuse, and take whatever's left. While Daniel takes the fall. He's the one with the real job, the professional reputation. Banks will go after him, not her. She'll cry victim. Maybe even claim domestic abuse. Financial control is a favorite accusation. By the time the dust settles, your son will be unemployable, bankrupt, possibly facing federal charges. I turned back to the table, to the evidence of my daughter-in-law's betrayal laid out like a roadmap to hell. But roads run both directions. "Mr. Cole, in your professional opinion, if someone were to report this to the right authorities before the mortgage closes..." He leaned back, choosing his words carefully. "The bank's fraud department would freeze everything immediately. The FBI would get involved. Wire fraud across state lines is federal. The state attorney general would look into the investment scheme. Every investor would lawyer up. It would be a bloodbath. And if the report included evidence that one party was deceived, that signatures were obtained under false pretenses, with the right documentation, that party might be seen as a victim rather than a perpetrator, especially if they cooperated fully with investigators." I picked up the Instagram screenshots, the ones where Savannah called me the old bitch and bragged about manipulating Danny Boy. And these would establish pattern of deception. Prosecutors love messages like these. Juries love them even more. I gathered the papers carefully, organizing them into categories: bank fraud, wire fraud, investment fraud, forgery. Each stack represented years in federal prison. Each document was a bullet in my gun. "Thank you, Mr. Cole. Send me your final invoice." He stood to leave, then paused. "Mrs. Whitmore, Cases like this, they destroy families. Your son might hate you for exposing this. He might choose her side, even knowing the truth. I thought about Daniel at 6, crying because other kids had dads at the school play. Daniel at 16, working nights at Target to help with bills, even though I'd told him not to. Daniel at 22, hugging me at graduation and promising we'd always be family. He already chose her side, I said. But I'm his mother. Saving him isn't a choice, it's a duty. After Avery left, I sat at my table with a legal pad and began planning. 3 calls to make, 3 agencies to contact, 3 knockout punches that would bring Savannah Pierce to her knees. But first, I had a performance to prepare for. She wanted me humiliated in front of witnesses. Perfect. The more witnesses, the better. The dinner party was set for Friday at 7:30 p.m. at the High Hollow Country Club. I had 2 days to prepare my ammunition. Thursday morning, I sat at my kitchen table with 3 phones, my old landline, my cell, and a burner phone from the gas station. Spread before me were post-it notes, each containing a crucial phone number, arranged like chess pieces on a board. First, I needed to understand the exact mechanism of destruction. I opened my notebook and began mapping the money flow with a precision I'd learned from 30 years of tracking every penny. Daniel's salary. $8,000 bi-weekly, deposited to joint checking at First River Bank. From there, Savannah transferred chunks, $3,000 here, $5,000 there, always just under the $10,000 reporting threshold. The transfers went to Pierce Legacy Holdings, also at First River Bank. From that account, a spider web of payments, credit cards, personal loans, something called consulting fees to people with no listed businesses. The pattern was clear structuring, deliberately keeping transfers under federal reporting limits. That alone was a federal crime. Next, I studied the mortgage application for the High Hollow house. The loan officer was listed as Patricia Morse at Pinnacle Home Lending. Her direct line was on the disclosure documents, the ones Daniel had signed without reading, trusting his wife to handle the details. I dialed the number on my burner phone, then hung up before it connected. Not yet. I needed to time this perfectly. The second number belonged to First River Bank's AML department, anti-money laundering. Every bank had one, required by federal law. I'd found it buried in their terms of service. The small print nobody reads. Their suspicious activity hotline operated 24/7. The third number was the prize the Lakehurst County District Attorney's Office, White Collar Crime Division. Avery had provided the direct line to an investigator named David Stern, who specialized in financial fraud. But calling them too early would give Savannah time to maneuver, to spin stories, to possibly convince Daniel I was the villain. No. Everything had to happen simultaneously, publicly, undeniably. I pulled out a fresh legal pad and began scripting my calls. For the bank. I'm calling to report suspicious structuring activity in accounts linked to Pierce Legacy Holdings. I have documentation of systematic transfers designed to avoid federal reporting requirements. Pattern dating back 18 months. For the mortgage company, I have evidence that a gift letter submitted for loan application 947238B contains fraudulent information. The listed donors do not exist. The funds are not legitimate gifts, but laundered investor money. For the DA, I'm reporting an ongoing investment fraud scheme operated through Pierce Legacy Holdings, involving falsified documents, forged signatures, and approximately $2.3 million in investor funds. Each script included specific account numbers, dates, amounts. I practiced reading them aloud until I could recite them without emotion. Just facts that would trigger immediate investigation. But I needed one more thing, a paper trail that would surface naturally during any investigation. I took the bus downtown to the public library, used their computers to create an anonymous email account. Then I scanned every document Avery had given me, uploading them to a cloud drive. The email I composed was simple. Concerned citizen with information regarding fraudulent activity at Pierce Legacy Holdings. Documents attached demonstrate pattern of investment fraud, structuring, and forgery. Primary victim appears to be Daniel Whitmore, whose signatures were obtained through deception. Please investigate before November 15th, mortgage closing at High Hollow Estates compounds fraud. I scheduled it to send Saturday morning at 9 a.m., the day after the dinner party. By then, my calls would have already set the machinery in motion. Friday afternoon. I took out the dress I'd worn to Daniel's college graduation, navy blue, conservative, forgettable. But I added my mother's pearl necklace, the one thing of value I'd kept through all the lean years. Savannah needed to see me as the pathetic mother-in-law trying too hard. Let her think she'd already won. In my purse, I placed the manila envelope with copies of everything, the Instagram messages calling me a bitch, the forged gift letter, the HELOC Daniel didn't know about, the operating agreement that would strip him of everything. But the crown jewel was a printed screenshot of Savannah's text to her mother from 3 days ago. After the old cow grovels tomorrow night, Danny will be so disgusted he'll probably cut her off completely. Then we can move the timeline up. File in January. Claim emotional abuse and financial control. With his name on everything and mine protected in the LLC, I'll walk away with the house and half his retirement. Garrett women always land on their feet. I also packed my phone, fully charged, with the 3 numbers already programmed for quick dial. At 6:45 p.m., I stood before my bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me appeared exactly as Savannah expected, a 67-year-old nobody in an outdated dress, coming to humiliate herself for the privilege of staying in her son's life. But behind those tired eyes was something Savannah had never bothered to see, the steel core of a woman who'd survived her husband's death, raised a son alone, worked brutal nights for decades without breaking. I'd been underestimated my entire life. It had become my superpower. I called a taxi, not an Uber. Taxis took cash and kept no electronic records. As we drove toward High Hollow, I reviewed my plan one final time. 3 arrows, aimed at 3 vital organs of Savannah's empire. Each call would trigger protocols that couldn't be stopped once started. Banks don't ignore structuring reports. Mortgage companies must investigate fraud allegations. District attorneys salivate over cases with documented evidence. The timing had to be perfect. Too early, and Savannah might get word before the party, allowing her to play victim or spin the narrative. Too late, and she might sense danger and leave. No, it had to happen during the party itself, with all her important guests watching. The Highland Motors executives she was so eager to impress. The country club society she'd tried so hard to join. The investment partners she'd been stringing along. They all needed to witness the moment Savannah Pierce's empire came crashing down. The taxi pulled up to High Hollow's stone gates at 7:25 p.m. I paid cash, took a receipt, and walked through the entrance. Time for the performance of my life. The Highland Room at High Hollow Country Club glowed with warm amber light from the crystal chandeliers. Round tables dressed in ivory linens filled the space. Each centerpiece, a small fortune in white roses and gold-dusted eucalyptus. The smell of money was literally in the air. Aged whiskey, French perfume, dry-cleaned wool. I counted 43 guests. The Highland Motors executive team occupied 2 tables near the front men in identical dark suits, distinguishable only by their tie colours. Wives in cocktail dresses that cost more than my yearly salary had been. Savannah's investment partners were scattered throughout the Brennans, the Coopers, Dr. Morrison and his much younger third wife. Even the mayor's deputy chief of staff had shown up. Savannah had positioned this as Daniel's career-defining evening. The promotion to regional director hung on impressing these people. She stood near the bar in a white dress that made her look bridal, laughing at something one of the executives was saying. Her diamond necklace, the $8,400 one, caught the light with every gesture. Daniel stood beside her in his best suit, his smile tight with nervous energy. "Eleanor." Savannah's voice carried across the room like a bell. "Everyone, Daniel's mother has arrived." The way she said Daniel's mother, not Eleanor, or my mother-in-law, told everyone exactly where I ranked. I walked toward them, conscious of every eye following my progress, noting my department store dress, my sensible shoes, my careful steps. Mrs. Whitmore. James Highland, CEO of Highland Motors, extended his hand. His grip was firm but brief, his attention already shifting back to Savannah. "Your sons told us so much about you." I doubted that sincerely. "Eleanor was just telling me she had something special planned for tonight," Savannah announced, her green eyes glittering with anticipation. "Weren't you, Eleanor?" "Yes," I said simply. "Very special." The dinner proceeded with military precision. Highland's wife discussed their recent African safari between the soup course and salad. The investment partners compared notes on cryptocurrency over the fish course. Savannah orchestrated conversations like a conductor, always steering focus back to Daniel's brilliance, their perfect marriage, their exciting future. I ate quietly, watching, waiting. At 8:45, between the main course and dessert, Savannah stood and tapped her spoon against her champagne flute. The room fell silent. "Before we continue," she began, her voice carrying perfectly, "I wanted to address something important. Family." She looked directly at me, and I saw the predator behind the smile. "Daniel and I believe in accountability, in growth, in maintaining standards that reflect our values and our position in this community." She paused, letting the words settle. "Sometimes that means having difficult conversations, even with those we love." My hand found my purse, feeling the weight of the manila envelope inside. "Eleanor," she continued, "has something she'd like to say to all of you, about respect, about behavior, about understanding one's place in a family dynamic." The silence was suffocating. Every face turned to me, some curious, others uncomfortable, a few clearly excited by the prospect of drama. I stood slowly, my mother's pearls warm against my throat. "You're right, Savannah. I do have something to say." I pulled out the manila envelope, thick with evidence, and set it on the table with a soft thud. "But first, I think everyone here should know exactly who they're dealing with." Savannah's smile flickered. "Eleanor, this isn't Pierce Legacy Holdings," I said, loud enough for the entire room to hear. "An LLC registered in Delaware, operating here in Ohio. 12 investors, $2.3 million collected. Almost no legitimate assets." The room shifted, uncomfortable murmurs rippling through the crowd. That's enough. Daniel started to stand, but I raised my hand. Your wife has been running an investment fraud scheme for 3 years. The money you've all invested. I looked at the Brennans, the Coopers, Dr. Morrison. It's been going to pay off $500,000 in personal debt, credit cards, loans, a HELOC on my son's house he doesn't even know about. This is insane. Savannah's voice pitched higher. She's having some kind of episode. I pulled out the first document. Gift letter for a mortgage application. $820,000 house closing next week. The gift is supposedly from Victoria and Richard Pierce. I looked at Savannah. Your father's name was Gary Garrett. He died in 2018. Gasps echoed through the room. James Hyland set down his whiskey. The signatures on these investment documents. I held up the papers Avery had analysed. Half of them are forgeries, including yours, Dr. Morrison. Did you know you supposedly invested another $50,000 last month? Morrison's face went white. I never. The operating agreement for Pierce Legacy Holdings. I continued, pulling out the next document. States that upon dissolution or divorce, sole ownership of all assets transfers to the managing partner. That's Savannah. My son is listed as an investor, but he has no actual claim to anything. When this collapses, and it will collapse, he'll be left with all the debt. None of the assets. Mum, stop. Daniel's voice was strangled. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I pulled out my phone, the 3 numbers glowing on the screen. I understand that your wife called me a bitch, planned to humiliate me tonight, and is preparing to divorce you after destroying your career and credit. I held up the Instagram screenshots, then the text about filing in January, claiming emotional abuse. Savannah lunged for the papers, but I stepped back. You wanted a public apology? I asked her, my voice steady as stone. Here it is. I'm sorry I didn't see through you sooner. I'm sorry I let you isolate my son. And I'm sorry for what's about to happen. I looked around the room at the assembled witnesses, executives, investors, society pillars. But I'm not sorry for protecting my son. I raised my phone, my finger hovering over the first number. Shall we start with the bank's fraud department, the mortgage company, or the district attorney? I thought we'd do all 3. Let you all listen. After all, you're all witnesses now, and some of you are victims. The room erupted. Investors pulled out phones, demanding to see documents. Hyland's team stepped back from Daniel as if he were contaminated. Savannah's carefully constructed evening shattered like the champagne flute she dropped, crystal scattering across the marble floor. I pressed speaker and dialed the first number. The room fell silent except for the distant clink of kitchen dishes and Savannah's sharp breathing. First Riverbank Suspicious Activity Report Line. This is Marcus speaking. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I'm calling to report systematic structuring in accounts linked to Pierce Legacy Holdings, LLC, account number 749-28365. Ma'am, can you verify your relationship to this account? My son, Daniel Whitmore, is listed as co-investor. His salary has been funding transfers deliberately kept under $10,000 to avoid federal reporting. I have 18 months of statements showing the pattern. The sound of rapid typing filled the speaker. Ma'am, I'm seeing multiple flags here. Are you saying these transfers were made without proper authorization? I'm saying they were structured to hide the real purpose, paying off personal debts disguised as business investments. The pattern shows transfers of $9,900, $9,800, always just under the limit. Savannah stepped forward. You can't, Mrs. Whitmore. Marcus's voice cut through. I'm initiating an immediate freeze on all accounts associated with this LLC pending investigation. Can you provide documentation? I'll email everything within the hour. The freeze is effective immediately. All linked cards and transfer capabilities are suspended. As if on cue, Savannah's phone buzzed. She looked at it, her face draining of color. My card just got declined. That's impossible, she whispered, frantically tapping her phone. But the Highland Motors executives were already backing away, their faces masks of professional disgust. I dialed the second number. Pinnacle Home Lending, Patricia Morse speaking. Ms. Morse, my name is Eleanor Whitmore. I have evidence that loan application 947238B contains fraudulent documentation. The gift letter for $164,000 is falsified. That's a serious allegation. This loan is scheduled to close in 6 days. The donors listed don't exist. Richard Pierce died in 2018. The funds shown are actually investor money from Pierce Legacy Holdings, not a gift. My son's signature was obtained through deception. Hold, please. The line went quiet for 30 seconds that felt like hours. When Patricia returned, her voice was sharp. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm looking at this file now. If you have evidence of fraud, I need to see it immediately. I'm emailing it now, I said, already pulling up the documents on my phone. I'm suspending this file pending review. The sellers will be notified that closing is postponed indefinitely. Savannah's phone rang. She answered with shaking hands. Her side of the conversation barely whispers, "What do you mean postponed?" That's impossible. No, there must be a mistake. The investment partners were on their feet now, surrounding the table where I'd spread the documents. Dr. Morrison had the operating agreement in his hands, his face purple with rage. This says I have no claim to my investments if the company dissolves. Check section 12B, I said calmly. Paragraph 4. Time for the third call. Lakehurst County DA's office, Investigator Stern. Mr. Stern. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I'm currently at the High Hollow Country Club with multiple witnesses and victims of an investment fraud scheme operated through Pierce Legacy Holdings. Witnesses. 43 people, including 12 defrauded investors. I have documentation of forged signatures, falsified bank statements, and evidence of intent to commit wire fraud crossing state lines. Are the suspects present? Yes. Savannah Pierce, formerly Savannah Garrett. My son Daniel Whitmore appears to be an unknowing participant. His signatures obtained through marital deception. Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to keep everyone there. We're dispatching units now. Don't let anyone leave with documents. Understood. The room erupted. Investors shouted questions and accusations. Highland's team was already heading for the exits, one of them on the phone with legal. The mayor's deputy chief of staff was practically running, his wife struggling to keep up in her heels. You destroyed us, Savannah hissed, advancing on me. You stupid, vindictive. Mrs. Pierce. James Highland's voice cut like ice. I suggest you contact your attorney. Highland Motors will be pursuing full restitution for fraudulent misrepresentation. Daniel. He turned to my son, who stood frozen, his face white with shock. Your employment is terminated effective immediately pending investigation. Mr. Highland, I interjected. My son was deceived. Look at the dates on these transfers. They coincide with his business trips. She moved money when he wasn't here to see it. Highland paused, studying the papers. Dr. Morrison thrust at him. This appears to be extensive deception. The sound of sirens grew closer. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, we could see patrol cars pulling into the country club's circular drive. Savannah grabbed her purse, but the Brennans blocked her path. Our 300,000, Mrs. Brennan said coldly. Where is it? It's invested. In what, Mr. Brennan held up the asset summary. 2 properties worth 400,000 total. Where's the other one? 0.9 million. The ballroom doors opened. 2 uniformed officers entered, followed by a detective in a grey suit. Who's Eleanor Whitmore? I raised my hand. Ma'am, we need those documents preserved as evidence. Nobody leaves until we've taken statements. Savannah's phone lit up with notification after notification, email after email, as the scheduled sends from my cloud account began hitting various regulatory agencies, law firms, and news outlets. What did you do? She whispered, staring at her screen. What you taught me, I replied. I thought about our future, planned ahead, made sure everything was documented. The detective approached Savannah. Mrs. Pierce, we need you to come with us for questioning. I want a lawyer. That's your right, but your assets are frozen, so you might want to look into a public defender. As they led her toward the door, she turned to Daniel. Baby, you know I love you. This is all a misunderstanding. Tell them. But Daniel wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the papers on the table, at the text messages calling him Danny Boy and planning to claim abuse, at the forged signatures and hidden debt. 300,000, he said quietly. My entire savings. Daniel? Get her out of here, he told the officers. The room watched in stunned silence as Savannah Pierce was escorted out in her $8,000 necklace and white dress, her empire in ruins, her victims already calling their lawyers. The Highland Room, scene of so many celebrations of wealth and success, had become a crime scene. The Highland Room emptied slowly, like air bleeding from a punctured tire. Investors huddled with phones pressed to their ears, calling lawyers, spouses, accountants. The Highland Motors executives had vanished within minutes, their abandoned champagne flutes still bubbling on the tables. Somewhere in the kitchen, staff whispered and peered through service windows at the wreckage of what should have been the social event of the season. Daniel sat alone at our table. The documents spread before him like tarot cards revealing a doomed future. His tie hung loose. His face aged 10 years in 10 minutes. 300,000, he repeated, not looking at me. Everything Dad's life insurance left us. Everything you saved. Everything I saved. The investigators will recover some of it, I said quietly. Will they recover my job? My reputation? His voice cracked. Mum, I'm finished. No one will hire me after this. My name is on everything. I pulled out the final document from my envelope, the one I hadn't shown the room. No, it isn't. He looked up, confused. 3 weeks ago, Avery, the private investigator, had a handwriting expert analyze your signatures. 40% were forged. The HELOC forged. The operating agreement making you liable for company debts forged. The gift letter. You signed it. But the addendum changing the source of funds. Forged. Daniel stared at the analysis report, his hands shaking. You were deceived by your spouse, I continued. That makes you a victim, not a perpetrator. The FBI will see it. The district attorney will see it. And with cooperation, Highland Motors might see it too. She said she loved me. The words came out broken, hollow. She loved what you represented. Stability, steady income, a clean credit score, the perfect mark. He was quiet for a long moment, watching the patrol car's lights strobe across the country club's windows. The detective had taken my statement, bagged the evidence, given me a card with a case number I'd be referring to for years. The house, Daniel said suddenly. I'll lose the house. You'll lose Savannah's house, the one she mortgaged without telling you, decorated without consulting you, filled with things meant to impress people who were never really your friends. Where will I go? I reached across the table, past the bread plates and water glasses nobody had touched, and took his hand. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't pull away. There's a 1-bedroom apartment in a building with thin walls and temperamental heating. The woman who lives there worked night shifts for 30 years to give her son a future. She never remarried because no one could ever matter more than that boy. She's been waiting for him to come home. Daniel's composure finally broke. He sobbed like he hadn't since his father's funeral, his shoulders shaking as 3 years of manipulation and betrayal crashed over him. I'm sorry, he choked out. Mom, I'm so sorry. The things she made me say to you, the way I treated you. She didn't make you, I said gently. She convinced you. There's a difference, and recognizing it is the first step back. The staff began quietly clearing tables around us, pretending not to notice the ruined man crying in their ballroom. The manager, who'd greeted Savannah like royalty an hour ago, now avoided our corner entirely. How did you know? Daniel asked finally, wiping his face with a cocktail napkin. How did you see through her when I couldn't? Because I've been poor my whole life, I said simply. I know what real class looks like, and it has nothing to do with money. Your father had it, he'd give his last dollar to anyone who needed it. You had it once, before she convinced you to be ashamed of where you came from. But Savannah, she had expensive things. That's not the same as having class. Through the windows, we watched them load Savannah into the patrol car. Even from here, I could see her on her phone probably calling her mother, or whatever lawyer would take her calls now that her accounts were frozen. The dinner party, Daniel said suddenly. She wanted you to humiliate yourself, to beg for forgiveness in front of everyone? Yes. But you knew. You came here knowing what would happen. I came here knowing what needed to happen. He looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time since Savannah had entered our lives. You saved me. No. I stood, collecting my purse, leaving the manila envelope for the investigators. I gave you the chance to save yourself. What you do now, that's your choice. We walked out together, past the empty tables with their wilted centerpieces, through the lobby where just hours ago Savannah had air-kissed society wives who were now deleting her number from their phones. The valet brought Daniel's BMW around another thing he'd probably lose in the bankruptcy. Follow me home, I said. You're home. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. As I waited for my taxi, I looked back at the high, hollow country club, its windows glowing against the dark Ohio sky. Somewhere in a federal holding facility, Savannah Pierce was learning what real consequences felt like. Somewhere in their suburban mansions, 12 investors were calculating their losses and calling their lawyers. But in a one-bedroom apartment on the wrong side of Cedar Falls, there would be coffee brewing and a pull-out couch made up with fresh sheets. There would be photo albums she'd tried to make him forget, stories about his father he needed to remember, and the slow, painful work of rebuilding a life based on truth instead of appearances. Daniel pulled up beside me as my taxi arrived, through his window. I saw something I hadn't seen in 3 years, my son's real smile, tired and broken, but genuine. "I love you, Mom. I love you too." The Highland room stood empty now, its silence complete. The champagne had gone flat. The ice sculptures had begun to melt. And somewhere in the wreckage of toppled chairs and abandoned evening bags, my cloth gloves lay forgotten on table 12. I didn't go back for them. I didn't need them anymore. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Eleanor's position? Your perspectives make these stories come alive. Until next time, remember a mother's love isn't always soft, but it's always fierce.